Pronoun Phrases Flip Books are one of many different visual supports that can be used to learn and practice pronoun phrases. Before we start, if you need more information about the patterns for saying pronoun phrases, check out a video tutorial that I've done which is posted at both the MinSpeak as well as my own YouTube channel. Also, you can download free Pronoun Phrases Flip Books at my Teachers Pay Teachers store. All right, let's get started. There's no one right way to practice pronoun phrases with your flip book, but rather different ways to address different challenges, learning styles, and language learning needs. Sometimes I pick one of the phrase pictures, let's say the watch, and systematically practice all, or at least most of, the 28 forms of that phrase coded with that picture.
I was. You were. It was. She was. We were. They were. He was.
After making statements, practice asking questions. There are two ways that I use the Pronoun Phrases Flip Book as a visual support to say the question phrases. With children with emerging language skills, I keep the flip book in the position for telling, so the pronouns and pictures align with the direction in which the child physically moves his or her hand to say the phrase. This also has the child visually scanning across the flip book from right to left. But reading teachers would rather have the student looking at the book from left to right. So I flip the book over and practice saying the asking phrases, verbally and visually prompting the student as needed.
Was I? Were you? Was it? Was she? Were we? Were they? Was he?
Eventually, I introduce negation, first with the telling phrases and then the asking phrases. The emphasis is on having the not in the middle.
I wasn't. You weren't. It wasn't. She wasn't. We weren't. They weren't. He wasn't. Wasn't I? Weren't you? Wasn't it? Wasn't she? Weren't we? Weren't they? Wasn't he?
Using the flip book, we practice these 28 phrases, and the person not only learned the picture for saying phrases, but is also learning the pattern for telling, asking, and using negative contractions. Picking one phrase word and practicing all forms of that phrase, like I did with was and were, is my favorite practice protocol for phrases that use a totally different word because of the different pronoun used. That different word is different in both spelling and sound. By doing all versions of these phrases, the person improves auditory awareness and discrimination for how the phrases should sound. I believe it also supports understanding and use of subject-verb agreement. As the person learns the patterns, I like to pick a group of related phrases and teach those pictures and phrases together. A group of related phrases are those that are linguistically related or have similar language uses. For example, I practice phrases together that teach about the forms of the verb to be using the be and the go pictures. Using the flip book as a visual support, I want to see and hear those phrases that use forms of the verb to be. I also emphasize those phrases which, when asked as a question, include either do or does in the phrase. We call these do support question phrases. Working on these as a group is definitely something I do when I use the flip book. Speaking of do, I like to practice do phrases in contrast to the did phrases. This allows me to work on the notion of past tense. You don't want to just do drills using the flip book. Make sure you apply what you are practicing. The flip book is just a visual tool to support language learning. Any time spent practicing with the flip book should be balanced with intervention that applies what the person is learning to their daily life. And I'll do the same practicing with the flip book when I introduce have versus had phrases, and follow it up with application. Here is an example conversation with a student talking about lunch. I'll model on the device and also use the flip book as a visual cue to prompt the student. The next related group I might introduce is can, will, and shall. When a child learns to use the word can, he can now talk about his abilities. And talking about abilities is followed by talking about intent. Using the word shall is much more formal and sounds a bit archaic to a modern American ear. But I'll introduce it to people, especially adults, and generally applying it conversationally, focusing on phrases with the pronouns I, we, and you. I love spending time with those fun could, would, should phrases. When I practice these, we can talk about possibilities. We talk about how some action or event is possible using the word could. We talk about imagined, iffy, or but events or actions with would phrases. Should is used to talk about something that is proper or the right thing to do. Learning these phrases and applying them in a context is a great opportunity to address the social aspects of communicating. And when you're doing it, the flip book is available as a visual support and prompt. That leaves us with one more related group, might, may, and must. These phrases let us talk about how certain we are of something. Many people with disabilities lead very uncertain lives because they're not in control of many bits of their daily life. Working on these phrases with the flip book allows me to talk about some of those personal and practical issues. I'm going to take a little step back and say that in some circumstances, when starting out teaching pronoun phrases, I might not spend too much time on all the pronoun phrases possible. Rather, I might simply introduce a handful of very practical phrases that I know are important for daily communication use. Select pronoun phrases to teach based on the kinds of things the person is already trying to communicate. Just make sure to teach a variety of statements, questions, and negation. By learning practical phrases right away, the person will be talking with more than one word, getting the social power of sounding like he or she is building a sentence. I'll still have the flip book present as a visual support and wait to see if the person shows interest in exploring what he or she can say using the flip book. There have been many reports of students who spent time independently using the flip book to match and explore pronoun phrases, surprising their parents and teaching team with new phrases they discovered on their own. I've covered a lot of information about how to approach teaching pronoun phrases in the context of language intervention. The goal is for the language to become internalized and use of the patterns automatic. Until that happens, I keep the flip book handy.